Tonight we're going to be discussing some controversial things, and I know you've heard of them. And some of you may laugh when I bring it up, but I don't think it's a laughing matter. I think that that people who experience these things, for the most part, are genuine. And I'm going to capitalize on that aspect. You know, there are people out there who tell tall tales, and we've all heard them. Not everyone that says they've seen a flying saucer or UFO is actually telling the truth. Not everyone who says they've seen a ghost or Bigfoot or some other type of apparition is telling the truth. But I think for the most part, when you get into it, and when you look at all these things we're going to take a look at, there are people who have really had an encounter with something. And I think it's genuine. What it is, I don't know. And I think that that's really where the gray area is. Okay, I have a pretty good idea. But, you know, and I've talked about this before when it comes to things that are dimensional and things that manifest in our little three-dimensional world. You really don't know exactly what you're dealing with. And, you know, in my belief, the spiritual dimension has principalities and powers, and there's also other types of spirits. You know, the Bible talks about lying spirits. It talks about, you know, familiar spirits or spirits of divination, unclean spirits. But really, we don't know. And there's a lot of mystery involved with that. And I think that some of those things that people are looking at, I think the possibility is pretty strong that something from another dimension is messing with them or attacking them. Some of these phenomena are mixed together. Some people talk about sleep paralysis. And in their experience, they don't see anything. They just feel paralyzed. They can't move. They can't move their eyes. They can't move their body. Sometimes they can't hear. I've had sleep paralysis. But some people, they say that they can see things. Something is moving around them, or sitting on their chest, or maybe on their back, or approaching them as they're laying in their bed. Some people hear things. They can hear things being smashed around. I know that I was watching a video on energy vortexes. And, you know, supposedly there are locations that have a type of bending of our, you know, the fabric of our reality. And there's different phenomena that take place. And some of those have to do with hearing things and seeing things, interacting with sometimes beings or entities, or just experiencing strange sensations or warped visual perceptions, things that affect the physics that we're used to. So I think a lot of people are searching. They're trying to figure out what has happened to them, what is interacting with them, and why. I know that targeted individuals deal with a lot of different phenomena, and it's interesting because there's some similarities actually. Okay, because targeted individuals, people who experience group stalking, everything seems to be normal or semi-normal, at the very least. Some targeted individuals have been experiencing phenomena their whole life. Not all of them. And a lot of people will experience kind of a normal life up to a certain point. And then it changes. And I've talked about the fact that, you know, the techniques involved in group stalking and gang stalking, they're designed to infiltrate the psyche of the victim through traumatic sensitization, or they are subjected to heavy attacks that leave them wondering and maybe even paranoid. And now, after they've been attacked, they try to get evidence. And, they're let in on the fact that they're being hunted, that they're being stalked. And then, once they notice all these things, once they've been hit, well, the methods change and they become more covert, and it's hard to get evidence. People who experience that kind of thing, their lives are altered. They might be experiencing break-ins, workplace harassment, covert poisonings, covert druggings, street theater, gaslighting of all different kinds, just weird things, unorthodox behavior, and, well, nobody believes them. And I think there's a similarity, because you'll see that in the stories. People will have an experience maybe in a specific geographical location, and when they return to figure out what it is, they can't find anything. Or they'll try to have the experience again and nothing happens. Maybe they'll travel to a place where they've heard that there's a lot of activity, maybe paranormal stuff, and something will happen. But then, just as soon as they experience it, it's gone and without a trace. It's very common with the Bigfoot encounters. People swear that they hear the call of this animal, or maybe objects are thrown at them, or trees are, damaged in a way that would be literally impossible for maybe a bear or a human. Some people do find evidence. They find little footprints or whatever. They're not little. But for the most part, there's really no evidence of these creatures, right? If they were just an animal, like a bear or something, there'd be a fossil record. But we don't have any of that. And I believe it's genuine. I believe that these people are experiencing something, okay? But just like the targeted individual, as soon as it starts, it changes. It becomes covert. And they're left wondering what's going on. They're left trying to explain something that's very significant to them, that has impacted their life, and people around them, they just don't believe them. One of the other similarities of targeted individuals and people who have experienced paranormal phenomena is they're labeled as crazy, right? They're labeled as having some type of hallucination or whatever. And the other similarity is, how could so many people, basically it's worldwide, as far as I can tell, both the targeted individual phenomena and things like Bigfoot, or, people seeing flying spaceships and stuff like that. They think they've had encounters with aliens or been abducted, or they've seen things like the chupacabra, or other types of things like the black-eyed children. And, how could all these people have the same hallucination? Doesn't make sense. It doesn't. And it's not possible. There's got to be something to these things. And, really, when it comes down to it, you have that other thing, and it's the split. Okay? There are a lot of things in common with people who experience gang stalking and people who experience paranormal phenomena. Okay? Because there are the people out there that don't experience it ever. They never have anything weird happen to them. Okay? They just don't. And it's like that with gang stalking. People that have not experienced these things, they just look at targeted individuals like they're crazy. And it's the same way with paranormal phenomena. I had an encounter with a Bigfoot, right? I could smell it, I could, hear it. And people just think they're either lying or they're crazy. It's the same thing. There's a divide. And that similarity right there is what I want to focus in on just for a minute. Because, why? Why would there be people who don't ever experience these things and people who experience it on a frequent basis. A lot of people have come up with explanations for that, that they're in tune with the spirit realm, or they're from a specific lineage. I've even heard people reference their blood type. I've had all kinds of things, as far as ideas. But if I had to guess, I would say it's just like the gang stalking. It's obfuscation. Okay, it is done so that the people that experience this stuff are going to be discredited, right? Nobody's going to believe them. And the other thing that I've noticed is that some of these phenomena are, kind of geared towards a specific group of people sometimes. Maybe a specific type of religion or nationality. Some of that mythology goes into maybe the Indian type of heritage. The stories go way back, it's not a coincidence, okay? And we know that the spiritual dimension is about manipulation, and they have to blind people. They have to keep things secret. They have to create this orchestrated menagerie to where certain people are getting some of the facts, and it's almost like compartmentalizing everything and then spinning it out in a way where everything is just turned into a twisted form of the truth, right? So everybody's got a little piece of the puzzle, and the only way that you're going to connect the dots together is if you're going at it a certain direction, right? That's why I always use the biblical criteria. It works well for me. And I've noticed that I can connect the dots every time, right? In that video that I made, Rise of the Beast. And I'm not saying I'm right about all that stuff, but the interesting thing is that you can connect those things all the way back to the Garden of Eden, okay? Whether I was right about the abomination of desolation or any of that's not the point. The point is that it's coherent in a way where you have the revelation of Jesus Christ, right? That's the big takeaway from it. Whether you're studying prophecy to figure out who the Antichrist is going to be, or what the abomination of desolation is, or what this means or what that means, is the consistent theme is that it's gonna be talking about Christ. It's gonna go all the way back to the Garden of Eden, and you're gonna have this battle between good and evil, of darkness and light, of lie versus the truth. And when you're dealing with this stuff with gang stalking or paranormal activity, in my opinion, you're dealing with the same thing, okay? But there's variables, and those variables are very interesting. As we can see back in Genesis, before we had the flood, we had things that were mingling together, angels and humans, okay? And I've talked about the fact that you have, several different options for the end time scenario. You have the classic version of the Antichrist, who's going to come out of Europe, and then everybody's going to be worshiping an image and have a mark so that they can, enter into the economic system. And then you have the Muslim Antichrist, where you have, the revived Ottoman Empire, and it's kind of centered around the Middle East and so forth. And then you have the other version, where it kind of gets into the fourth beast. I think Jonathan Kahn mentioned this stuff, that it talks about a mixture or something that's altered. And we also have transhumanism and those types of delusions, where people are going to achieve immortality through gene manipulation and the combination of artificial intelligence and human DNA and all that stuff. And that opens up a lot of possibilities, okay? Because you might not just be dealing with something that is from the spiritual realm. You might be dealing with something that's combined, right? Or something that's been spliced together. Part human, part animal, part angel or something. You don't know, because they've played around with this stuff before. And the truth is, we don't know a lot about the spiritual dimension. People talk about portholes. They talk about teleportation. Some people even talk about time travel. And I get into the time dilation. A lot of people speculate that, that God just knows everything. And it opens up the door to a lot of conundrums. A lot of people will get into the predestination aspect of that, but I don't think it has to be that way. And, we remember from the story, when God had to flood the world, he said that he regretted the fact that he had made man on the earth. Well, if he knows everything in advance, and he's just omniscient in a way that is explained by most religious factions, he wouldn't be able to say that, really, would he? Really? I mean, that doesn't make sense. You see my point, okay? It's not to say that God's not sovereign, okay? What I'm getting at is that how is that working, right? Is it that he just knows everything and all? I mean, people try to figure this stuff out, and I think there's a lot of room for mystery. There is. I'm not saying that it's all time dilation and dimensional perspective, but it's if we're going to speculate, well, why not? And I think it's the same way with all these other things. There's just so much mystery involved that we really have to get down and investigate this stuff. I've also noticed that when you get into looking for evidence of a lot of these things, not all of them, but some of them, like with the white noise, or people will get into contacting spirits and so forth. It's almost like you have to do something forbidden just to get to that point, right? It's pretty coincidental because the Bible forbids that kind of thing. Right? And, there is some evidence there. I mean, you do have to take people's word for it. But when it comes to the white noise, there's some stuff that is just, wild, and you can tell that people are being genuine because if they were going to manufacture something, they would do it in a way where it would be, really obvious. But there's that element to where you are dealing with something that you have to look at it objectively. It's kind of like the Bigfoot documentaries and stuff. You have those guys that do those cheesy reality shows, and you always see something running around in the woods. They can never catch it or whatever. But the real documentaries, most of the time they don't find anything. They might find something, but it's definitely not something that's manufactured. There's so many similarities between these stories. I don't think these people are getting together or making this stuff up. And as far as the electric voice phenomena,
everybody's laughing at you.
I mean, some of the white noise that you hear is, I guess it's that good, but most of it, you got to sit and listen to it. I don't know. I think something's going on there. I wouldn't suggest anybody try to do that. Like I said, I don't think we're supposed to be doing that. We don't want to be talking to that kind of stuff. And I don't know, guys. I believe that a lot of these things are connected to the kingdom of darkness. Okay. Like I said, if Bigfoot, for example, and I'm going to use him to, as an example, was just an animal, we would have more evidence, right? We've got plenty of skeletons of bears and deer and moose and all that stuff. Bigfoot, if he is just an animal, he's damn smart, and there's something going on with him that is, supernatural. Okay? Whether he's a dimensional being or not, there's something about him that's unnatural. Nobody could deny that. If that wasn't the case, he'd have all kinds of evidence laying around. There'd be skulls, there'd be fossils, there'd be bones, there'd be all kinds of things. But there isn't, and you have to look at it for that. You have to notice that. It's the same way with this other stuff. And a lot of people talk about aliens, and when is there going to be full disclosure? And you hear a lot of testimonies of people that worked at Area 51, and people have seen these little people, Maybe they're not lying, but does that mean that they're from somewhere, from, you know, another galaxy and Alpha Centauri or something? I don't think it does. Like I said, there are a lot of variables, and just because it's not something that we would understand, or we speculate that because there's a lot of outer space, a lot of different galaxies, that there's got to be life out there, and people are speculating that these beings have come from another solar system or something. Well, I don't know. I don't think it has to be that way. But we don't understand all that stuff anyway. And when you look at the eyewitness accounts of a lot of things that have to do with unidentified flying objects, they change direction so fast, or they'll take off at such a high rate of speed that, you know, the physics of it, if anybody was in there, or any kind of fleshly creature, they would be destroyed just by the G-forces alone. Okay, and I was looking into the flying saucer thing, and what I found is that, you know, a guy had basically come up with this stuff with anti-gravity. I can't remember exactly all the terminology right now. Maybe I'll do another show about that. But there's patents on these things. The only thing about them is they don't fly very fast, as far as I know. But all the evidence, would suggest that we're probably playing around with this stuff, trying to figure it out. And, you know, the fact that these things are defying the laws of physics would suggest that they're also interdimensional. Okay? And some of the information that you run across, especially when it comes to UFOs, is directly connected to the occult. I guess Hitler was basically trying to contact the demonic realm for that type of technology. I don't know how true that is. There is that out there. There's other things that are similar to that. Okay, so there's obviously some kind of connection there. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, nothing is isolated. You want to be that person that tries to connect the dots, to bring everything into a coherent picture. Okay? Nothing is isolated. Everything that you do, everything that you come in contact with, has a direct and equal and opposite effect on something else. Nothing in this biosphere, nothing in this solar system that we are dealing with is isolated. Okay? Everything involves a chain reaction. And I think the glue, I think the common factor, if you will, amongst all these areas, whether it's sleep paralysis, whether it's Bigfoot, whether it's aliens, whether it's gang stalking, whatever. Whether it's the chupacabra, the skinwalkers, the black-eyed children, time dilation, time travel, all of it's the spiritual dimension. Every single time. So that's going to be my big emphasis on this, okay? And like I said, though, there's a lot of variables, just like the testimony from people in Area 51 or whatever that have seen the little guys that were supposedly driving the spaceship. Maybe they did. Maybe there's some type of genetic manipulation going on, okay? I wouldn't, make fun of it. A lot of people used to joke around about the chemtrails. And in fact, I can't find that information on YouTube for some reason anymore, guys. Let me know if you can find it. They had the meeting in Mojave County, Arizona, about the chemtrail stuff out there with barium in everybody's blood. And I was going to put that on the playlist. Maybe I just couldn't find it. Maybe it was a bad couple days of looking for it. But it used to be there, so let me know if you can find it out there. They always do that. They always take stuff down. It's either too much or not enough. They either hit you with a cluster of information from all directions to confuse you, or they'll just hide it. Just lock it away somewhere. Yeah, you know who they are. And the thing that I like the most about looking into all these things is just hearing people's testimonies, I've heard some pretty wild stories before. Getting into one, there was a guy that I used to know, and I used to visit with him after work Gosh, I think the last time I saw that guy was either in 1994 or 1995, and he worked at a convenience store. Unfortunately, he got shot in the chest. There was a robbery, and it had to do with the gang initiation, I think, as well. It was pretty weird. I went in there to see him, and I wasn't paying attention to the newspapers, and he was just gone. They stole a small amount of money. The guy got 25 years or something like that in prison. But this guy told me a story about teleportation. Okay, he didn't tell me at first. We used to talk about just, regular stuff. I got to know him, and after about a year, he told me this. And, it was one of those days where I was talking about some weird stuff, and it was late at night. It was one of those quick ways, and nobody comes in. It was just me and him. And, the hair on the back of your neck is kind of standing up, and you're getting into these weird conversations. You're kind of comparing things together. And he told me about this guy that used to be into the occult, right? And he had mentioned that sometimes he would call him, and of course this was back before everybody had a cell phone. It was, back in the mid 90s. I think it was 94, 95, something like that. And he would call him on his landline, and the guy would say he was coming over, and he would be there and like less than a minute. And it was like almost all the way across town where he lived. And it just was like completely impossible for these things to happen. And, he confronted him on it, and he was always kind of playing this little game with him. And finally, he came clean, and it was some type of weird thing where he was taking off his clothes and all this stuff. And I guess he had him, if I'm remembering correctly, he had him drop him off somewhere, and he actually took most of his clothing and gave it to the guy and had him go wait somewhere. And he appeared right on the other side of a graveyard or something like that, and it was just insane. And the guy swears that he was doing it. He was able to do it. He wasn't like a Satanist or something, but it scared him enough where he quit hanging around with the guy. I've seen pretty weird things. I remember there was a guy that used to come over and party with me, and it was about the same time. It was the mid 90s, and he used to talk about some weird things. And he was always pulling off little street theater things. And I wasn't really paying attention because I dealt with that stuff before, and I was just to the point where I didn't care. But this guy, one night, he spent the night. We were drinking pretty heavily, and it was just one of those things where he wasn't going to leave. He was just too drunk. And so, we both, went to sleep, and I woke up. I was only asleep for a little while, and he was gone. Okay, the doors were locked and everything. He didn't have a key. There was no way he could have locked the deadbolt, right? He couldn't have just left and then locked the deadbolt and everything. Everything was the way it was. I had locks on the inside of the door because of, the paranoia and everything. And it was like, where is this guy? I looked everywhere for him. I looked in the closets. I looked everywhere. There wasn't that many, places this guy could have hidden. And he was nowhere to be found, right? And I thought, how the hell, that didn't even make sense. I almost wondered if I just dreamt the whole night up. And I went back to bed, and when I woke up, there he was, And, he was laying there on the couch, and he just laughed at me. And, I forgot to mention, he had this little picture that he had drawn. I'm not going to tell you what it was. It was kind of creepy. And I noticed that he had this little picture, okay, that he had drawn. I don't know what it had to do with anything. I never heard of anything like that. And I asked him about it, and he just laughed at me, and he said, well, why don't you figure it out? Okay, and one time I went up to his house, and I was hanging out with him, and he was living with his brother, and we were in the garage, and I stepped out for a minute, and I was in front of the door. There was only one door to go in the garage, right? And I went back in, and he had drawn this little picture again, and he's gone. He was nowhere to be found. And his brother was sitting out there shooting basketball. And I said, where the hell did he go? I said, he's been doing this to me. He goes, did he draw his little picture? And I said, yeah. He goes, oh, he's playing his little game again. He goes, well, you're not going to find him, And I don't know. The guy ended up, he turned out he was pretty evil, and I had to quit hanging around with him. There was another guy that I used to hang out with back, I must have been 13 or something like that. I went to school out in North Dakota for a while. And you know how you get around and you start talking about stuff. And it was in a dormitory. And we were all telling our little stories. And there was some pretty interesting things that people had to say. But this guy was 100% believable, right? Because he started to cry when he told the story. He was so scared. He was so shook up about what he had seen. He was in tears. And this guy was probably the toughest dude in the school, literally. Hands down. Okay, I'd never seen him show any emotion before that, except rage and anger. He was good at that. He used to get in a lot of fights. But evidently he had lived in a certain area. I think it was up in Fargo, North Dakota. And there was a Satanist church that was kind of close to his house. And one night, him and his brother were outside, and they heard something. If I remember correctly, it was kind of a roaring sound, maybe like a jet or something, except that it was accompanied by what he said it looked like lights or type of a kind of a ray. And it was shooting up like a spotlight, but not quite. It was accompanied by a lot of strange little lights and weird things that were kind of going up into the atmosphere out of sight. But it was like a big beam, I guess, of light. It had different colors and all this weird stuff in it, and these weird sounds coming out of the top of the church. And it scared him and his brother so bad that they didn't even want to go outside at night or even go near this place. Right? They lived over there and there's nothing to do. But he was so freaked out when he told the story, he was shaking. I mean, he was shaking and he was crying and he was just all blubbery. We had to calm him down, I mean, I totally believed that he was telling the truth. And another story I was just told not too long ago. It was just within the last few days, I got in contact with an old friend that I went to the academy with. I've mentioned that before, out in Minnesota. And he's had some Bigfoot encounters. He's got some pictures of trees being torn basically in two, but not close to the ground, way up 8-10 feet above the ground, and it had ran by his little house that he made out of a bus when he was camping. I think it was up by Flathead Lake. I can't remember for sure. In another incident, evidently it looked right in the window of his bus. And I guess he had been drinking a little bit, and he was just at the point where he was almost passed out, and he could feel this sensation. And a lot of people talk about that. I've had that feeling way out in the country before. It's like this feeling of dread mixed with this idea in your mind that something is watching you, and you don't know what it is. You think, well, maybe it's just an animal or something, but it's more intense than that, because there's a distinct flavor of fear with it. It's unnatural. It's just a weird feeling. Evidently, he started to feel that, and he actually saw the face of this thing. It was kind of woolly looking, and it looked right in the window at him. And I think he's telling the truth. I've known this guy for quite a while, almost 30 years. And you hear all that stuff. I guess his wife was a skeptic until just a while ago. I can't remember how long ago it was, but evidently he's had a lot of encounters. That's the thing that you deal with individuals who they might encounter UFOs or Bigfoot or whatever, or the gang stalking. They have frequent encounters You can never figure out when it's going to be, though. You know, it always surprises you. But there's that type of activity, and like I said, other people don't have it. But I guess his wife had actually heard something. It was the call of this thing, and I guess it scared her pretty bad. But you know, getting back to that feeling of dread. You know, I assumed that it was something else, and I actually, you know, visited some of the areas that he's had these experiences in, and I, you know, even going back to when I was a little kid, I remember I had a three-wheeler and a motorcycle, and sometimes I'd go way out. I'd go, you know, 40, 50, 60 miles out in the middle of nowhere, and I used to do a lot of hunting. I had predator calls and stuff like that, and I would try to call in coyotes or fox or whatever. And I would have that feeling. I never saw anything. I've never seen a Bigfoot, never saw anything like that. But I would have that feeling that something was wrong. I mean, to the point where I would be so nervous that I would get on my three-wheeler or my motorcycle, and I'd take off, and I'd get the hell out of there, and I'd go back towards civilization as fast as I could. It didn't happen all the time. Probably a handful of times, but it did happen. And you know, according to him, he thinks that's probably what it was. I don't know. You know, like I said, when it comes to these experiences, I think the common factor that is involved, in my opinion, would be the spiritual dimension. Okay. I think it's the glue that holds all these things together. I think that's the explanation. But like I said, there's so many variables. You don't know if you're just dealing with something that is coming from another dimension, like maybe a spirit when people get attacked spiritually, or whether it's something that has been altered, whether it's something along the lines of you know, splicing DNA together from, you know, maybe animals and humans, or the angelic realm, and, you know, a combination of the three. You don't know. You just don't. So, you know, I think these things are significant. I'm probably going to make another video about this stuff. I might be a little more specific, because there's just so many areas, right? And a lot of people have experienced these things. You know, a lot of times people will have deja vu before they have these encounters. You know, they'll have the sensation of fear. They might have dreams or whatever that surround the time frame that they have these encounters. And a lot of things that go together in people's experience, whether it's UFOs, you know, whether it's gang stalking, you know, whatever it is. So guys, I want to hear your testimonies. I want to hear some ideas. I want to see it in the comments. I want to see if you guys have experienced these things, and I want to know your thoughts. I'll end the video with an entertaining soundbite of the latest Bigfoot story I heard from an old friend.
Don't worry, I'm just gonna go out and get the cat.
I smelled that smell I told you about earlier. The cat's probably hiding. I knew we shouldn't have come up here. You better stay in and not go out.
Not your Bigfoot thing again. I'll just take the gun.
I showed you a picture of that tree. You run into him, that gun ain't gonna do you no good.
When it was your idea to come up here, what's the smell I'm supposed to look for anyway?
Well, you hear or see anything strange, or you smell anything like a skunk crossed with a billy goat's ass, you better run back here as fast as you can.
Gosh.
That gun ain't gonna do you no good.
How am I supposed to know what a billy goat's ass smells like? Come here, kitty. Come here, kitty, kitty, kitty. I'm sure a billy goat. He probably smelled his own ass. Whew. Oh my gosh, what's that? Oh!